If you've spent a season preparing for a corn harvest, you already know this isn't just another routine. It's the culmination of a season's worth of investment, risk, and precision. But more importantly, it's also the start of a critical window, one that determines not just yield quality, but the long-term health of your soil. What happens in the days after harvest can either repair the biological structure of your land or degrade it further, crop after crop. This is the part most growers don't plan well enough for, the transition between harvest and restoration. And in corn systems, especially under mechanical harvest conditions, the soil takes a bigger hit than you might think. In this video, you'll learn what advanced corn harvesting looks like today and how science-backed post-harvest soil strategies can reclaim fertility, reduce compaction, and protect your next rotation. If you're here because you want yield stability, machine efficiency, and regenerative improvements built into one seasonal plan, this is exactly what you were looking for. Modern corn harvesting is a mechanical ballet of speed, weight, and pressure, all of which have consequences below the surface. The average combine harvester today weighs upwards of 20 tons when fully loaded. Combine that with high horsepower grain carts operating under tight harvest windows, and the result is extreme surface and subsurface compaction, especially in moist fields. Farmers often underestimate how far compaction travels vertically. University trials show that axle loads over 10 tons can compact soil 16 to 24 inches deep, reducing pore space and interfering with root penetration for the next crop. Corn systems, which often run on tight rotation with soybeans or wheat, can't afford cumulative losses here. One season of rushed harvest without remediation can take 3 or more years to fully repair, especially in fields lacking proper cover or tillage strategy. That's why your harvest process isn't just about speed or volume, it's about managing the biomechanical footprint of your operation. Are you tracking cart paths? Do your operators know how to pivot loads across different entry rows to prevent rutting? Do you monitor ground pressure data during harvest? If not, you're likely causing yield loss before the next seed hits the soil. Precision harvesting today isn't only about GPS guidance for rows, it's about equipment configuration, field traffic management, and integrated soil compaction sensors. In some North American farms, especially in Ontario and the Midwest, producers are now using dedicated in-field logistics maps to assign cart routes ahead of time. These maps are adjusted based on slope, soil moisture index, and known compaction zones. The goal? Minimize traffic overlap, especially in high clay or poorly drained zones that are prone to deep soil deformation. After the last pass of the combine, what you leave behind is as important as what you hold out. Corn stubble, root crowns, and fallen debris make up to 7 tons of biomass per acre. If unmanaged, this residue becomes a barrier to seed-to-soil contact in the spring. But if utilized properly, it's one of your best tools for rebuilding soil structure. The difference comes down to your residue treatment strategy. High-speed discs, vertical tillage units, or strip-till systems can all play a role, depending on your field's slope, organic matter content, and next crop. For example, in continuous corn systems, microbial breakdown of stover is often too slow without supplemental nitrogen or carbon-activating enzymes. That's where targeted applications, like urea ammonium nitrate UAN or residue digesters, have shown benefit in field trials. Applying 10 to 15 gallons per acre of UAN on high residue zones can accelerate decomposition, free up nutrients, and reduce early nitrogen tie-up in spring corn or soybean stands. But chemical inputs are only one part of the picture. The biological response of your soil post-harvest will define your success next season. Soil health isn't a static score, it's a living system that reacts dynamically to residue load, moisture, microbial activity, and root mass density. In corn systems harvested after frost or under wet conditions, biological activity often crashes due to surface sealing and anaerobic zones. To counter this, more progressive farms are turning to biological stimulants, compost teas, humic acid treatments, or rhizobacteria inoculants, designed to reintroduce microbial balance. Trials in Iowa and Manitoba show measurable increases in soil respiration and nitrogen mineralization 3 to 4 weeks after such applications, but only if the residue has been sized appropriately to allow microbial access. Equally critical is the management of compaction zones. Deep tillage might seem like the obvious fix, and in some cases, it is especially where hard pans have formed below the 10-inch layer due to repeated heavy harvest passes. But deep ripping is expensive, energy-intensive, and sometimes unnecessary. Before considering it, use penetrometer readings or cone index tools to identify actual zones of resistance. In drier post-harvest windows, where soil shatter potential is higher, deep tillage can be highly effective, but only if done with minimal disturbance to topsoil structure. Alternatively, in regions moving toward regenerative practices, cover crops are now being used as biological subsoilers. Taprooted species like daikon radish, forage turnip, and sun hemp can penetrate compacted layers while simultaneously fixing nutrients and shielding soil from winter erosion. Seeding cover crops after corn, especially in northern climates, is a race against time. You must choose varieties with quick emergence, low thermal requirements, and high biomass return. In Ontario and New York, farmers are broadcasting cereal rye, crimson clover, or even hairy vetch directly into corn at the V6-V8 stage using high-clearance drones or in-turro spreaders. This method allows the cover crop to establish under the canopy and take off rapidly once the corn is harvested. Where broadcast seeding isn't viable, post-harvest drills are employed immediately after the final combine pass, ideally within 24 to 48 hours to capture remaining soil warmth and moisture. The result isn't just a green cover, but an insurance policy. Roots that stabilize the soil, uptake excess nutrients, and enhance infiltration during the winter thaw. Fertilizer timing is another factor often overlooked after corn harvest. Many growers apply phosphorus and potassium immediately post-harvest based on removal rates. While this makes sense on paper, broadcast applications on compacted, residue-heavy soils can lead to immobilization or runoff loss. Instead, consider targeted banding or subsurface placement for these nutrients, especially if you're using minimum till or strip till systems. Furthermore, the integration of precision variable rate applications informed by yield maps, soil grid sampling, and EC data ensures that nutrients go only where needed, minimizing waste and environmental risk. Post-harvest is also the prime opportunity for long-term soil amendments. This is when you can apply bulk compost, pelletized gypsum, or even biochar without interfering with crop emergence. These amendments play a structural role in improving soil tilth, water retention, and nutrient cycling, particularly in fields that have been chemically intensive for multiple seasons. In sandy loam zones with poor CEC, adding stable carbon materials post-harvest helps buffer nutrient fluctuations and improves microbial carrying capacity. When you step back and consider the entire arc of the corn production cycle, the harvest is not the end. It is the threshold. And how you cross that threshold with your equipment, your residue plan, and your soil biology strategy determines whether you're just pulling grain or building resilience. Understanding what happens in the soil after corn is removed is fundamental to sustaining your productivity, but that knowledge only matters if you're ready to act on it, decisively and early. One of the first missteps is underestimating how vulnerable the field is within the first 5 to 10 days post-harvest. You're dealing with exposed root channels, open soil pores, and uneven residue coverage. This condition accelerates evaporation, increases erosion potential, and encourages weed establishment if not corrected quickly. What matters now is how well your post-harvest response strategy balances protection, aeration, and preparation for either overwinter or early spring planting. In a conventional tillage system, some growers instinctively turn to heavy disc harrows or offset plows to break residue and level the field. But this approach is increasingly being reconsidered, especially in no-till or strip-till systems, due to its impact on soil microbiology and water dynamics. Deep mechanical disruption, especially in fields with marginal organic matter or poor aggregation, can destroy microbial networks, accelerate oxidation of soil carbon, and reduce water infiltration capacity. That's why many experienced operators now evaluate post-harvest tillage as a surgical intervention, not a routine. You apply it where necessary in compacted, low drainage areas, but not as a blanket treatment across the field. This strategy is rooted in research from Illinois, Nebraska, and Saskatchewan showing that selective strip till following corn harvest improves nutrient placement and spring trafficability without degrading the overall soil matrix. Another key strategy after corn harvest is drainage reassessment. With heavy harvest machinery often creating pinch points across fields, shallow compaction zones can shift how water flows or stalls. Saturated root zones during fall or thaw periods increase the risk of anaerobic conditions and nitrogen leaching. If your field is already on a tile system, this is the time to review flow data, pipe depths, and inspection ports. Aerial NDVI imagery and post-harvest drone flights, taken within a week of final harvest, can reveal pooling patterns or depressions that didn't appear on pre-season maps. In high-value corn acres, especially on heavier clay soils, some farms now run subsoilers equipped with GPS-tagged shanks to reopen legacy channels or add new lateral lines for improved winter drainage. As we move deeper into the post-harvest phase, another decision must be made: whether to inoculate your soil. Unlike pre-plant inoculation with rhizobia or mycorrhizae for legumes, post-harvest inoculants serve a different purpose. They're designed to digest residue, balance microbial load, and prepare the soil biome for the next rotation. High-carbon corn residue can overwhelm soil bacteria, tying up nitrogen and suppressing seedling emergence in spring. Products containing Bacillus subtilis, Trichoderma harzianum, or specific cellulose-degrading microbes are increasingly being used to accelerate this transition. When applied at rates between 0.5 to 1.5 gallons per acre and supported by sufficient moisture, these microbial packages can reduce visible residue by 25 to 40% over winter, a measurable advantage when calibrating no-till planters in spring. For operations leading toward regenerative practices, biologicals are part of a larger plan, building a living soil that processes nutrients in situ. Post-harvest is the ideal moment to evaluate your soil's respiration rate, a key indicator of microbial health. Tools like Solvita CO burst tests or Haney tests offer insight into microbial biomass and nutrient release potential. Interpreting these results correctly allows you to match cover crop species and planting density to your field's actual biological activity, not just soil type. In fields where biological indices are low, overwintering legumes like crimson clover or hairy vetch can act as both microbial feedstock and spring nitrogen source, especially for corn followed by wheat systems. But there's another equally important factor many operators overlook: timing. Post-harvest interventions lose effectiveness the longer you wait. The thermal window, the period when soil temperatures remain above microbial dormancy thresholds, begins closing rapidly after harvest. In the Midwest, that means you often have just 3 to 4 weeks of usable biological time before soil tone drop below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Every day lost to indecision is a day of microbial inactivity, water runoff, and nutrient volatility. That's why more farms now plan post-harvest moves during the harvest itself. As soon as the last pass is complete, operators move in with residue treatments, shallow incorporation, or drill-seeded cover crops without delay. In dryland corn systems, especially in the western US and parts of Australia, the post-harvest focus shifts toward water retention and erosion control. Bare soil under high wind and low humidity conditions is at extreme risk of topsoil loss, particularly in sandy loams and decomposed granite soils. Here, growers are deploying rolled mulch techniques using terminated cover crops or surface tackifiers to stabilize the soil surface. In some cases, leftover corn stalks are windrowed and mechanically crimped across the field to form an insulating layer that traps dew and prevents wind scouring. This kind of physical barrier is especially effective on fields with moderate slope or south-facing exposure, where solar desiccation is strongest. One increasingly adopted post-harvest solution is biochar, a carbon-rich amendment made from pyrolized crop waste, including corn cobs and stalks. Applied at rates of 1 to 4 tons per acre, biochar improves cation exchange capacity, moderates pH, and enhances microbial habitat. In acid-affected fields or degraded soils from years of chemical loading, biochar provides long-term structural stability. Studies out of Ohio State and the University of New South Wales have shown increases in water holding capacity and nutrient retention when biochar is paired with compost or manure. Its high surface area binds nutrients and moisture, preventing leaching while providing habitat for beneficial microbes. But its effect isn't immediate. The benefits accumulate over seasons, which makes post-harvest the perfect entry point for those serious about sustainable soil recovery. Just as critical as physical and biological amendments is your fertility planning. Post-harvest soil sampling is essential, not just at surface level, but in depth layers. Many legacy corn fields have hidden stratification issues, with nutrients like phosphorus and potassium concentrated in the top 4 inches, and deficiencies beginning immediately below. Pulling composite samples from 0 to 6, 6 to 12, and 12 to 24-inch zones allows you to understand vertical distribution, critical when transitioning to deep-rooted rotation crops or strip-till systems. Without that insight, banded fertilizer may miss the root zone entirely, costing you yield and efficiency. In high-yield operations, sulfur, boron, and zinc also demand attention post-harvest. These secondary and micronutrients are increasingly being applied in fall, either through dry blends or liquid injectables, to preempt spring deficiencies. Sulfur, in particular, leaches quickly in sandy soils, making post-harvest banding, especially in strip-till, more efficient than spring broadcast. But uptake depends on microbial oxidation, again reinforcing the need for active biology even in the cold season. Some farms now co-apply micronutrients with microbial stimulants, allowing for better chelation and soil root uptake during spring warm-up. One mistake that can be costly: ignoring soil compaction zones in fall and pushing remediation into the spring. By then, it's often too late. Fields are wetter, windows are tighter, and the priority shifts to planting rather than soil repair. That's why the most efficient operators use post-harvest scouting, penetrometer probes, yield maps, drone imaging, and past field data to map compaction while it's fresh. Then, using tools like controlled traffic lanes, strip-till with zone builders, or even low-pressure tire inflation systems, they begin remediation while soil structure is still cooperative. Ultimately, your success in corn production isn't just measured by the yield monitor on harvest day, it's in how well you manage what's left behind. The residue, the compaction, the microbial stress, all of it either sets the stage for another strong year or erodes the foundation beneath it. By the time the last truck leaves the field, your season's effort has been measured. You know the yield, the moisture content, and how your equipment and hybrids performed. But this final act of harvesting corn is only part of the production cycle. What comes afterward in the field, in the soil, determines whether your next crop builds on this year's success or quietly underperforms. The reality is that post-harvest soil management is no longer a passive phase. It's a defined window of opportunity to recover, reset, and reinforce your production system. Your soil has just gone through an intensive extraction process, physically from the equipment, biologically from the root systems, and chemically from the nutrient drawdown. You're not just planting the next crop into that soil, you're planting into the consequences of the current season. Whether those consequences are compaction, nutrient imbalance, microbial suppression, or residue overload depends entirely on what actions you take in the 4 to 6 weeks following harvest. Let's take a look at how that plays out on real farms. In southern Ontario, a 2,000-acre operation that rotates corn with wheat and soybeans has moved away from full moldboard ploughing altogether. Instead, they implement controlled traffic farming CTF combined with vertical tillage post-corn harvest. This system minimizes surface disturbance while managing residue uniformly. Their yields have remained consistent, but what changed was input efficiency. After switching to a post-harvest management approach that includes variable rate potassium application, cover cropping, and in-season strip-till nutrient placement, they've reduced total fertilizer use by 18% over 4 years, all while maintaining top-end production. Their soil organic matter increased by 0.3 to 0.5% in key fields, a small number, but significant on heavier clay loams. In Nebraska, dryland corn growers face a different set of challenges: water retention and subsoil fertility. One operation, with over 3,500 acres, now employs multi-depth soil sampling every fall to inform both nutrient strategy and crop selection for the following year. They noticed through Haney test reports that fields under conventional tillage had lower microbial respiration, even when fertility appeared balanced. The solution: They transition to full applied compost blended with biochar at 1.5 tons per acre. 3 years into the practice, soil moisture holding improved measurably, confirmed by both penetrometer resistance and crop stress monitoring. The key wasn't adding more nitrogen, it was building a microbial system that could hold and cycle what was already present. Meanwhile, in parts of Kansas and northern Texas, where wind erosion after corn harvest can destroy field integrity, growers are taking preemptive cover crop strategies even more seriously. Rolling rye, drilled radish, and barley blends are now seeded immediately after harvest using high-clearance applicators or aerial broadcast before final harvest is completed. These growers aren't waiting until the corn is off the field, they're integrating cover into the harvest plan itself. The goal? Maximize time under cover to prevent desiccation, suppress fall germinating weeds like maristale, and provide spring biomass for either grazing or green manure. One of the most overlooked but critical improvements you can make comes down to residue alignment. In high-residue corn systems, especially where yields exceed 100 bushels per acre, poorly distributed stalks can cause multi-year problems. Uniform residue not only supports even decomposition and nutrient cycling, but also improves soil warming and planter performance in spring. Several operations across Illinois and Iowa now use row cleaners and high-speed chopping heads that not only process stalks more efficiently, but windrow them in a manner compatible with strip till zones. The outcome is a cleaner zone, less hairpinning in the spring, and ultimately better stand establishment. Even in no-till operations, where soil disturbance is minimized, fall is far from idle. Biological amendments and fungal inoculants are applied through low disturbance sprayers or mixed with compost tea applications. These products are field tested, not speculative. Most of them are derived from certified strains shown to persist over winter and contribute to residue breakdown without releasing tied-up nitrogen prematurely. In Tennessee, cornfields where Trichoderma virans and Bacillus amyloidocoefficiens were applied post-harvest saw a 14-day faster breakdown of surface residue, enabling better contact between soil and emerging seedlings the following season. In Australia's Victoria region, where conservation tillage is often paired with moisture-limited growing windows, post-harvest becomes a sprint toward stabilization. Growers use composted poultry litter in low phosphorus soils to rebuild organic matter and activate microbial populations, but only after testing ensures heavy metals and sodium loads are within acceptable thresholds. Here, the residue is not an obstacle, it's a feedstock. Managed properly, it returns nutrients and stabilizes aggregates. Left unmanaged, it becomes a barrier to emergence and a vector for disease. Post-harvest is also the right time to invest in data, but only if that data feeds action. Yield monitors, soil scans, moisture sensors, drone imagery, all of them are tools, not solutions. Their value is realized when you sit down and align what happened above ground with what's happening below. Did that low yield patch correlate with compaction? With shallow rooting? With poor drainage? This is the season for agronomic reflection, not as theory, but as diagnostic precision. High-efficiency farms treat post-harvest like a forensic phase, not to assign blame, but to build resilience. Finally, let's talk about mindset. There is no such thing as done for the year in modern farming. There are just different responsibilities. You've already invested in the most capital-intensive stage: planting, spraying, harvesting. The marginal cost of optimizing soil health after harvest with better timing, calibrated nutrients, and focused residue strategies delivers a high return. Every acre you manage with long-term vision reduces variability, lowers input risk, and improves sustainability metrics that increasingly matter to consumers and buyers. If you walk your fields today and see bare patches, crusted zones, and untouched stalks, ask yourself what your soil will look like in March. Will it be frozen hardpan? Will it be anaerobic? Will it be ready? Every post-harvest practice you adopt is a choice, either to preserve yield potential or leave it to chance. You have the tools. You have the evidence. And now, you have the timing. The harvest may be over, but your soil is still listening. So take this moment to act, not to rest. Whether you're managing 80 acres or 8,000, what you do now determines how your soil performs not just next season, but for every season to come.